As I'm sure goes without saying, I love the Mega Man X series. The endearing cast of main characters, the smooth gameplay, precision platforming, challenging boss fights, satisfying moveset, a good set of unlockables. Throughout the years from 2015 to now, I cannot tell you how much fun I've drawn from X1 to X4. I know X3 is a bit more controversial, but for me, I could play all of these 4 games front to back any day of the week. I've also, of course, played the latter X games ad nauseum as well, despite the shaky ground in terms of quality. I own multiple copies of every game, and why not? I always do that for the game franchises I appreciate. The Mega Man X games really helped me out back in 2015, and of course, if I was getting into these games, it only makes sense to dabble into the other Mega Man franchises that exist, right? Well, shortly after my first playthrough of Mega Man X5 wrapped up, I got my hands on the Mega Man Zero collection for the Nintendo DS, the 2 ZX games that followed it, as well as the Anniversary collection which contained the first 8 classic titles. I'm most known for the all-inclusive Mega Man X retrospective of 2016 and 17, and ever since, there's been one burning request that is closely followed behind me wherever I go. That being the leap from the Mega Man X games to the next series in the chronology, the Mega Man Zero games. After a year and a half with some side X videos in the meantime, we're finally here to tackle Mega Man Zero 1, released for the Game Boy Advance in the year 2002 and re-released alongside its 3 sequels for the DS in 2010. We aren't just doing this game. As promised in the 2018 update video that you all totally watched and learned from, I'm also following this up with Mega Man Zero 2, then Zero 3, then of course Zero 4. But since the Zero series is pretty short in comparison to the X series, I've tossed in a bonus. The Mega Man Zero games were developed by Inti Creates, all 4 being released in the GBA. But when the leap to the Nintendo DS happened, they were at the helm of the next Mega Man series, Mega Man ZX, which only consisted of 2 games, ZX and ZX Advent, both of which are basically Zero 5 and Zero 6. So in this grand Mega Man Zero marathon, we're tackling all 4 Mega Man Zero games, and I'll be bringing up the Zero collection whenever relevant, and the 2 ZX games, all released in rapid succession as not keep you guys waiting. As I said, Mega Man Zero 1 was my first exposure to the larger Mega Man series following X5, and I didn't really know what to expect. But I noticed right off the bat that I had 2 health bars and all my potential moves were unlocked. That's when I realized just how much easier the easy scenario was. I still died a lot though, but we can most certainly address that later. I played all of the Zero games in 2015, and I enjoyed them all quite a bit, with Zeros 1 and 4 coming out as my favorites. This doesn't hold true anymore, but I figured I'd mention that. Since then, I've played all of these games a few times over, nothing religious like Mega Man X, but I've always had respect and admiration for the Zero series. I've only ever beaten both ZX and ZX Advent once each before this marathon, so it'll be interesting to see where I stand on those 2. But now it's time to give the spotlight to Zero in his own series. I mean, really, this was coming for a while. Going back to X1 when Zero was supposed to be the main character, the revival in X2, the limited playability in X3, fully playable character status in X4, and also in X4 is when the series became a lot more about Zero in general until Axel came along in X7. Keiji Inafune has always had a thing for Zero, and now he's showing that off with no shame. But enough of this, let's boot up the game. Mega Man Zero 1 opens with a really cool scene as this small group is seen running from a much larger power. These robots that look like X are chasing them down until the big mechanoids come in and really make some waves by killing most of our crew. Funny thing is, the game didn't even need any dialogue to convey the power difference here. It's like the opening of Star Wars. It just begins, we can clearly see how small in scale our side is with how much more powerful these guys are. The girl, whose name is CL, alongside 2 other Resistance members, are cornered, but they've reached their target, the last remnant of Zero, whom has been asleep for 100 years at this point. The Resistance members all die, and as the X-Bots get closer and closer, CL sends her fairy thing into Zero, which completely restores him. All she has to say is, Zero, help me. And that's how the game begins, with Zero ripping through the enemy force that just killed off the whole Resistance crew. That's how you open a game. Now we can clearly see why the Resistance wanted Zero, because they all just got slaughtered by these guys, and here's Zero and his arsenal can do it and no problem. Zero is also granted the Z-Saber by a mysterious light energy who disappears from the story for the time being. With the game tossing us right in like that, it's time for some backstory. Most of which shall be revealed in later Zero games, but in the context of this game, in between the X games and this game, X and Zero still participated in battle after battle in the Maverick Wars until a grand city named Neo Arcadia was built for humans and Reploids to live in peace. In fact, by Mega Man Zero, technology has increased to such a degree where the point where you can't even really tell the difference between the 2 anymore. This is where Zero's ending in X6 comes in. Zero had himself sealed for 100 years, and it was during that time that when Zero was analyzed, through his systems, the Cyber Elf technology was created. That was the fairy thing I was following CL earlier. Think Dr. Light from the PS1 X games, that's what a Cyber Elf is. X was and still is the leader of Neo Arcadia, and it was his forces that went after the Resistance earlier, since X has now grown so powerful that in his attempt to bring peace once and for all, he's now executing anyone he deems Maverick to sustain his peace. Sounds insanely uncharacteristic, right? Well, Zero does a plethora of missions to set back Neo Arcadia and allow the Resistance to gain some footing, and along the way he battles against the 4 Guardians of Master X, those being Phantom, Fafnir, Harpooya, and Leviathan, all created in X's image. Once all the stages are complete, it's revealed that X actually disappeared a long time ago, and has been gone for a while, and in his absence, CL, when she once lived in Neo Arcadia, built this replica of X who would act just like the original, but he's merely a copy whom struck out on his own to create his own vision of peace. We'll call him Copy X. That's when CL and her allies formed the Resistance, and they were on their last leg until they found Zero. Following this, a Cyber Elf appears and it grants Zero access codes to Neo Arcadia, and that's how he gets to the castle stage. That sounds a bit coincidental, but this Cyber Elf is the one true X. We know that since he says, "Go and exterminate that copy of me with extreme prejudice." Like, damn, X is pissed off at what Copy X has done to all those innocent Reploids. X was also the one who gave Zero the Z-Saber in the intro stage, since as we all know, he's had it since the end of X5. So X has existed as a Dr. Light figure for all this time, but he hasn't really been able to do anything about it since he didn't have a body. And now Zero being back was the perfect chance to destroy Copy X once and for all, to which Zero does, and that's basically it. But I really like the ending when X admits that after a century of fighting battles without Zero, he just kinda grew numb to the whole thing. And now he wants to leave in peace, at least for a while, and leave the safety of Earth in Zero's capable hands. And that's the story of Mega Man Zero. On paper, I think it works really well. Ever since X3, a big battle between Zero and X has been set up, which we got in X5, but there was also the potential case where X is the evil one as shown in the X7 ending. But when this game was hastily rewritten during development, this is when X being evil was replaced by the Copy X concept. I don't mind Copy X's existence, but there wasn't really much in the way of build-up. I mean, Cyber Elf X reveals that he's not the one doing this, and then CL admits to being the one who created Copy X to begin with. There was a lot of build-up to the grand fight with Copy X, since these mechs look just like him that chased after us, and the 4 Guardians were built in his image and put up quite the fight, which would set up a really big and challenging boss fight. But ultimately though, Copy X gets defeated rather unceremoniously as Zero mocks him for being not nearly as strong and capable as X was. Another thing this story could have done better was the amount of detail they put in. I mean, maybe there's an optional conversation I missed, but we really don't see how most people feel about Neo Arcadia, since we know that the Reploids are being retired by Copy X, which is horrible, but we also know that CL is the only human in the Resistance, so how do other humans feel? Well, we'll have to wait until 04, but this is 01, and this is an area of the story left in the rearview mirror. That's a shame, because what we do have from the Resistance is really interesting. Like Servo, who helps Zero with his equipment and works tirelessly to make sure the Resistance can keep going. Alouetta, a little girl Reploid that CL made to keep her company and helps her stay positive. Or this old Reploid, Andrew, who had once had a woman he greatly cared about, but she grew upset in the relationship since she was growing old, but he was not. That's because he's a Reploid and robots don't get old. So he modified himself to be older, but she's gone now and he is how he is. With characters like Alouetta and Andrew confirming just how blurred the line is between humans and Reploids, which like I said in the X retrospective, it started off very clear in the classic series, and then free will was introduced in the X series, and it'll keep being blurred more and more by ZX and Legends. CL's another great character since she's very proactive, as she's more or less the leader of the Resistance and doesn't mind putting her own life on the line to save Zero. And she does also feel remorse for having created Copy X despite the good intentions. I also really love Zero in this game. He just feels so no nonsense. CL was in trouble, she asks for help, intro stage starts. He helps the Resistance because he doesn't like what Copy X is doing. CL realizes it's hopeless as long as Copy X exists, so he says that if she won't be happy until Copy X is gone, then he's gonna go eliminate him. But they can't get to Neo Arcadia until X cracks the code, and when he does, Zero goes right away, tears through the bosses and guards and tells Copy X off, saves the day, and there's no anecdote about how they really made a mess, or CL needing to pick up the pace. This Zero is one I can get down with, especially with his ending monologue about him and X being the best partners as he stares in the face of an entire Copy X army. You know, the more I write about the story, the more I grow to love it, but again, it bears repeating that this story is good on paper, and while the execution of the Resistance, X, and Zero are all phenomenal, the forces outside of the Resistance are lacking in depth, since Copy X doesn't have much character, and the 4 Guardians don't either. But I think they make for entertaining rivals, and I look forward to seeing them develop throughout the Zero series, since they'll all come back. Except Phantom, we killed that freaking guy. That's pretty much all I gotta say for the story in Mega Man Zero, so how about the presentation? Well, first and foremost, the entire world has seen an art style overhaul. Oh my god, different universe confirmed! No, in all seriousness, the Mega Man Zero series does have its own art style, which includes redesigns for X and Zero, who are the only returning characters. It's not too much to worry about, as within the context of the Mega Man Zero games, this is just how they always look. Everyone just looks much sleeker than before, which I like. A good character design is measured by the silhouette, and you can easily tell this is Zero if you're familiar with his character design from Mega Man X. These designs transfer to the GBA quite well with good animation, although a lot of the bosses don't have the best animation, but Zero, the guy I'll be looking at most of the game, did get a lot of attention when it comes to animation, since while not as smooth as X4, certainly more detail is put in than in X6. The backgrounds vary in quality. I like the environments that look really old and withered, but a lot of the stage backgrounds are just there, like the endless dunes of the sand stage, or the machines in the more patched up areas. The Game Boy Advance is very hit and miss with the music, but one constant is the high pitch of GBA music. Some games do make it work and others don't, but Mega Man Zero fares in the middle of those extremes. Compositionally, I think Mega Man Zero is really good. I don't think it tops any of the best Mega Man X soundtracks, but if you ask me to listen to The Scorching Desert or Resistance, Enemy Hall, or Express UG, even in their original GBA forms, I wouldn't raise any objections. The full soundtracks for all 4 games have been officially remastered, and those all take advantage of the extra clarity that wasn't allowed in the GBA and produce better music overall. Now, for the gameplay. Where do I begin? Well, like I said earlier, Zero made his playable debut in Mega Man X3. There, Zero was a stronger, albeit beefier X, so he used his Z-Buster to maximum effect, with the Z-Saber he got in X2 coming into use as a final charge attack. Other than that, he could still dash, wall jump, but of course he had the issue of not being able to interact with the game mechanics in any substantial way. In Mega Man X4, Zero was radically overhauled to make his campaign different than X's. Zero now had close quarters combat gameplay with his 3/Saber and the unlockable combos from the Mavericks. This is just how playing as Zero was, and that continued in X5, Extreme 2, X6, X7, and X8. Mega Man Zero plays no differently than a proper Mega Man X game. Zero can run, jump, dash with the L button, which as I've said in the X reviews is by far the most comfortable placement of it, wall jump, and as a result, this makes playing stages just as dynamic as a good X game. I already said X8 controlled beautifully, and the Zero and ZX games are very much the same. I don't really know how to describe it, it's just Inti Creates just really got the physics right here, and not the Sonic kind. I just mean there should be a certain amount of fluidity when playing these games. X1 to X3 nailed this, and like I said, X8 and the Zero games are even better. There should be some weight to when making jumps, but not too much like the PS1 X games or X7, good god. So let me make it clear. I enjoy playing this game, but I do have a lot of problems with this one, and that start right now. The level design in Mega Man Zero is pretty good. I mean, it's very straightforward and easy to understand, but it's not very memorable. Games like X6 really suffer from being pathways with things on them, but Mega Man Zero is certainly not that bad. Within the stages themselves, there really aren't any set pieces I can immediately point to and say, yeah, that was from that one stage. Like the platforms going up and down from Storm Eagle in X1, or the time jumps in Magma Dragoon stage from X4. Usually when there is something about a stage that I remember, it probably sucked, like these log carriages in the factory, the sunken Rebel Force ship, nice callback by the way, or the damn disappearing blocks making their return from the classic series, which for some reason you can't wall jump on, or the spiked filled tower climb in the second castle stage. These are just a few examples of poor design though. The rest of the levels are good, but again, nothing particularly stand out. Like the desert level, which is just loaded with enemies, but there's not a whole lot to say about it beyond that. But since the mechanics are so fun to use and fighting enemies is so fun in the Zero games, I can forgive it since it's Inti Creates' first shot at a Mega Man game. Since this game wanted to expand the world of Mega Man, all these levels are actually interconnected. Like when you leave the Resistance base, you're in the first city stage where you probably progress to the right to play the stage, however to the left is a long walk to the desert stage. It's small world building, but it's still interesting to note how all of our operations are very close by to the home base, since it was established in the story that our teleporter pad can't even go to Neo Arcadia without cracking the code. Good on the devs for the ludonarrative synchronicity. The game is structured a bit differently than most Mega Man games. We don't have 8 bosses to select, but rather missions from CL to accomplish, and if you aren't a fan of commuting, just asking for the missions is enough to teleport you to the mission start point. This game only has like 5 environments to use for these missions, but they made it interesting. Like how the first time through the factory we need to make our way through the security system, but the second time is the fight with Phantom and he has disabled all that stuff and set bombs to blow up that we need to destroy. Or they'll change the stage, like how in the desert level you go all the way to the end of the area, but on the second visit you go down through the sand to find a hidden lab where the Repliforce ship has crashed. It's frozen in ice the first time, but when we need to revisit the lab, the ice has thawed since we opened the path, and now the ship is a rising and lowering challenge. The train stage does the same, since we need to reach the train first and then ride it to the central car, but on the second visit we start off where the train took off and do a great platforming section to reach the boss fight. Stuff like this is really good and very welcome. Most missions end with a boss fight, and I can just say these are some of the weirdest names in Mega Man history. It starts off normal with Aztec Falcon, but then we get Anubis Necromancis and Blizzak Stagroth R. Is that even English? Whatever happened to the simplicity of Storm Eagle or Neon Tiger? Anyway, that's not a big deal. The bosses in Mega Man Zero might seem daunting since they all have 2 or more health bars, but that's only because these guys take so much damage, especially with the redone weakness chain. In Mega Man, the game was designed to be a rock, paper, scissors scenario. Electman's weapon worked against Iceman, his worked against Fireman, and so on. The Zero series takes a very literal approach with this. Aztec Falcon drops the electricity chip, and 2 of the other bosses drop the fire and ice chips. Every boss will be weak to one of these things. Fire works on ice works on electricity, and electricity works on fire. Every boss will be one of these things as well, so it will be clear what the weakness is. Or sometimes not, like the elephant guy who's weak to the electric chip, but still. Beating bosses with their weaknesses isn't as easy as a badly made X boss, since the patterns don't fully reset, but the damage is so high that the bosses become very easy to brute force. You might still die a lot though, since the damage output bosses have is very high to compensate, but the patterns are usually very simple to get to grips with, so your results may vary. But bosses are made more annoying by other issues in this game. Let's just get to the weapons themselves. When starting off, Zero gets the Z Buster, so if you want to play Mega Man Zero's traditional X game, pick this one. It functions like any other standard buster in this series. Charge shot with 2 levels, standard pellets, and that's all there is to say on that one. By the end of the intro stage, you unlock the Z Saber, which functions just like X4. 3 slashes you can pull off in rapid succession with all the same mobility granted in X4, with it being very clear what frames of the animation hit enemies, as well as being able to hit enemies not necessarily in front of you. New to the Z Saber is the ability to slash while running and while dashing, and the ability to charge the Saber for a big slash, which just makes playing as Zero feel even better than it did back in X4 and onward. You can carry 2 weapons at a time. I set the Z Saber to the main weapon and change the sub weapon to fit whatever situation I need. And yes, there are more than 2 weapons, first being the triple rod. Zero can use this rod to stab enemies and also bounce on top of them, which is always cool to see when you can pull it off really quickly. Lastly, there's the shield boomerang, which can reflect enemy bullets, but it doesn't protect against grenades or fire or anything like that, which makes using it very situational and therefore not something I need to use often. All 4 of these weapons are usable with the chips, so don't worry about that. You're very free to experiment here. Also, in the options menu, you can change the controls however you like, but the GBA has 4 buttons, so it doesn't really matter. What does matter are the control types. By default, you need to hold R to use your sub-weapons, but with Type C, you can press it and then it will switch with a sound effect playing to indicate a switch. Speaking of sounds, the sound design is very satisfying in the ears with each Z Saber slash or Z Buster bullet, or the sound that plays when you collect E-crystals. Very good stuff. Back to weapons though, despite there being 4 options, this game is a big flaw that makes the game seem a lot harder out of the gate than it actually is. Scratch that, make this a few. So you'll notice that your Z Buster and Z Saber have 1 star out of a differing amount. Well, that's because these weapons aren't to the maximum potential at first. What do I mean? Well, the Z Saber starts off with 1 out of 3 slashes in the combo. The Z Buster does not allow you to charge up to the 2nd level, and you have to unlock that, as well as unlocking each additional triple rod stab. I'm sorry, but this is just stupid. All this does is serve to waste time and make the game more difficult by hampering my mobility. You upgrade these gradually like a Ratchet & Clank weapon where usage increases ability. Some of these I would be fine with, like you unlock the amazing spinning slash through jump slashes. But why the basic moves like the 2nd and 3rd Z Saber slash? When using the Z Saber on, say, Aztec Falcon, you can expect your ass to be kicked because only having 1 slash leaves you open for damage. If you use the Buster without a charge, it does little damage in addition to having to aim the pellets at the right angle to even make contact. Why not limit upgrades to additional moves, like the X4 power-ups where you unlock the spinning slash, you unlock the uppercut, and so on. Zero One has the right idea with the later upgrades, like I said, the spinning slash, or the Z Buster where you get 4 shots on screen at once. But the first few are just tedious for every weapon. So if you want to survive the early game, you better upgrade these weapons. Conveniently, the first stage is a good grinding spot, but why the hell do I have to stand here slashing away and bustering away just to have more pellets on the screen and more slashes for the Saber? This is monotonous. The other alternative, like I said, is getting your ass kicked by the boss. It's a lose-lose for the early game, and by the time you get the triple rod, which is a few missions in, why use it? You already have a decently powered up Z-Saber and Z-Buster, so why get your ass kicked in a desperate attempt to upgrade the triple rod now when dying undoes the progress? And you have better weapon alternatives. I can't think of any other way to look at this other than saying it's crap. Crippling player mobility is a major no from me for game design. So even when I've gotten past that by stage 2, the fact that stage 1 is ruined by this bout of baffling design is a major strike against this game. But that's not the end of grinding in Mega Man Zero 1 though. You might notice your health bar is similarly low to how it was at the start of an X game, but no, heart tanks are gone. In this world we have Cyber Elves, and these are collectibles in this game that come from dropped enemies or Cyber Elf crates. These come in all sorts of variations with 3 main categories: Nurse, Animal, and Hacker. Nurse relates to your health, Animals affect physical performance, and Hackers change data in the game like boss health bars. And you can only take 3 at a time. Problem with the Heart Tank and Sub-Tank Elves, and yes, Sub-Tanks can't be found in stages either, is that finding them is only half the battle. These Cyber Elves aren't strong enough and need to be fed energy crystals, which are also collectibles in this game. And you use them to feed Cyber Elves, which brings them up to snuff. But this creates an entirely different issue. Energy crystals are worth almost nothing, so if you want to increase your health or get a Sub-Tank, you'll be grinding for hours, no, ages, no, eons to get enough, and this is just plainly not fun. In my Mega Man Zero run, I had played every stage, got every drop of E-crystals I could find, grinded for a bit, and I only had enough to fuel 1 health up, when there's like 6. The funny part being, it only took 750 crystals, and it took me the whole game to get that. But the Sub-Tank Elves require 1,200 crystals each. Get out with that bullshit. Who has time to waste for all that anyway? Why did they design it like this? Getting the crystals isn't a bad idea, but couldn't they just reduce the amount needed? Or, you know, up the amount gotten so you don't have to devote your whole life to Mega Man Zero 1 just to stand a chance? What I did was use the lower powered elves that regenerate a bit of your health and use them as makeshift sub-tanks. Since I'm not getting sub-tanks in Mega Man Zero, it's just something I'll never be able to do. Nor the double health bar, which is achieved by first giving the elf 1,200 elves, and then you need 2,000. Get out game. I think what they were trying to do was prioritizing battling enemies with both these high requirements and the weapon star system for the purpose of making enemies an active part of the game. And believe me, I don't want it to be like X7 either. However, I was already fine with the amount of combat in X1, so why do we need to endlessly grind enemies all day? But the third issue in this game is the live system. Oh no. In my Mega Man X8 review, I made a big stink about the retooled live system, but that is better than this garbage. Retry chips made their debut in Mega Man Zero 1, and it was a bad sin that deserves to burn in the fiery abyss of hell. Technically speaking, there's no difference between lives and retry chips, but what X8 did was limit the number you could carry, and a game over sent you back to the shop to buy more. But X8 had a shop. Zero 1 does not, and so when you run out, your ass is to either find more, but retry chips are less common than girls who want to go out with me, that, or you're stuck with 1 life for the rest of the game, maybe just barely eking by with the 1 or 2 retry chips you do find, but you will inevitably lose them because the other issues in this game, like the weapon sucking out of the gate, and that increasing your health is a nigh impossibility. And don't you dare give up when the game gives you the chance after having lost all your chips. Why? Oh, well then the mission is considered a failure and you can't do it again. When 2 missions contain the fire and ice chips that make up 2/3 of the weakness chain. Here's what I did. I saved after every mission, and every time I died before the castle, I reloaded the save file, which is also something you can do upon death since I wasn't wasting any of my chips. So by then I had 9. But surviving the early game with these shitty things I've just discussed makes Mega Man Zero a game I really have a hard time going back to. Whenever I do play it, I'm surprised at how much fun I have with the mid and late game just because of these 3 things. With no room for error in the retry chips, this is what makes bosses harder than they seem because the consequences of losing are so high. Oh, and you gotta love screen crunch deaths. For the most part, Mega Man Zero is designed well enough around its screen size, except for this part we have to jump from Repliforce ship to another, since it's not even on screen, it's just a leap of faith. Or the more egregious example. Here in the factory where you need to jump from log to log and jump off to destroy the bombs, but then to get back on, you really need to cling on these walls at the very bottom just to have a chance of seeing the ground. And more times than not, into the pit you go. Yeah, get good, but who in the world has fun with things like this? Okay, time to calm down. Evidently, the devs agreed with me, since a part of the DS collection is the easy scenario, which makes all the games, well, easier. When going into this review, I was going to recommend playing 0-1 this way, since you don't have to upgrade your weapons, nor grind for energy crystals, nor farm for retry chips, all very game-changing things. But they went so far in the other direction that the game loses all challenge since spikes are no longer there, almost nothing poses a real threat to you, except the damn screen crunch, and all Cyber Elves are unlocked, which means you have 2 full health bars and 4 full sub-tanks, which you will never need because you have so much health and boosted defense. So I can't recommend this either, since like the Rookie Hunter mode in the X Legacy collection, the game ceases to be itself like this. All I really wanted was to boost your default stats, and maybe start off with a few stars unlocked, and not all. Still have to find some Cyber Elves, but lessen the crystal requirements, and no retry chips. If the easy scenario was just that, I would recommend it in a heartbeat. But it's so easy to the point where I literally beat it in an hour and a half when the GBA version took me 3. All that really leaves is the castle, and I don't have too much to say. And all the stages are pretty good, despite the annoying parts like the disappearing blocks in the first or the spikes in the second, which wouldn't be too bad because of the verticality. Falling down is very easy from the enemy fire, which sometimes sends you into a pit. Stage 3 also really stacks up on the enemies, but what I do like is how if you're good enough, you can take an alternate pathway straight to the boss rush. Otherwise, these stages are host to amazing music and some really good boss fights, easily understood patterns, but difficult to deal with in execution. I don't know if it was just my skills, but I felt like the bosses were a lot easier in the boss rush since I took no damage and kicked ass indiscriminately. Oh, and since bosses were so quick and explosions were so brief, I didn't really mind the boss rush. Yeah, that's a first, except for Phantom. Oh my god, what was that? Literally dying there still counted as beating him, so I'm convinced they literally just did that shit just to eat a retry chip and potentially force you to play the stage again. But luckily I didn't have to, and I made my way to Copy X. In the first phase, he switches between an electric armor, an ice armor, and a fire armor. You know what to do. The second phase kind of reminds me of Sigma and X1, but it's kind of an anti-climax. I mean, if you get out the door on the wrong foot in this boss fight, you'll probably die, but if you get a good groove going, it shouldn't be a problem. And with that, you've won the game. Yikes, that sounded negative. Well, let me just say, Mega Man 0-1 is a very fun game. These mechanics are great. The combat is great. I like the boss weaknesses chain. I enjoy the story and characters, and the level design is quite serviceable. The music and graphics are very well done. But despite this, Mega Man 0 is not a game I can easily recommend, since it has these 3 big flaws going against it that all compound upon each other, which makes the game very unbalanced in its difficulty. On their own, the weapon upgrades and Cyber Elves can be circumvented, but not the retry chips. However, all 3 of these things combined just make the early game a very tedious experience, and it's for the early game that Mega Man 0 is known for being so difficult when it really isn't. I had a lot of fun with 0-1 since I'm used to these 3 things and managed to come out on top, but results may greatly vary with your enjoyment. Despite the latter half of the review just being me screaming like I usually do, know that I do enjoy this game, and you may as well, since the game plays well and is a good package overall, but you also might rage quitting. I don't know. Mega Man 0 is nowhere near Mega Man X6 or Mega Man X7 in quality, since unlike those games with their crippling issues, Mega Man 0 is a good game, and it comes out on top in spite of its issues, rather than X6, which crashes and burns because of them. In fact, I'd probably pick 0-1 over X5 or X8 or most of the classic Mega Man games. So in conclusion, this is a good game with big problems, but trust me, those issues are only going to be addressed as we move forward to Mega Man 0-2, the Game Boy Advance, and DS. Thank you all for watching, I hope you all enjoyed the review, since I think this will be a great marathon. And take care.